too much of a bad thing, whatever the question is, the answer is almost always going to be yes. So for instance, does the United States have too much crime? Yes. Does every country have too much crime? Yet, like, who's ever going to be like, no, this is an appropriate level of crime? Mm-hmm. I think that there is certainly some waste, fraud, and abuse in the U.S. government. There's waste, fraud, abuse in the private sector. Just from the examples that I've seen, it seems like the United States, especially given its size, does an exceptional job in curbing a lot of the waste, fraud, and abuse, because you don't typically get these huge scandals where there are on the magnitude of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in fraud or actual just like waste or abuse happening. So I think for the most part, I think the U.S. government does a decent job, but I think we should always continue to keep the U.S. government honest.
I think you're almost agreeing with me, and I'm not sure why you're not over here, because that would assume that any amount of waste, fraud, and abuse is not good. And so the premise is that we should always work towards something better. And so if there is any amount of waste, fraud, and abuse, which you agree is in the private sector, it's probably in other countries as well, then you're going to want to take steps to mitigate, reduce, eliminate that amount of waste, fraud, and abuse. So any amount that we have, we could always say is too much.
I would disagree, because I think that too much implies that there needs to be extraordinary actions taken, or at least an extraordinary action taken to curb it. I think that there's going to be some percentage level of waste, fraud, and abuse always, and there's going to be like an ordinary number that you just accept. So for instance, it would be possible to make it so that nobody ever sped, ever, in the United States if you hired 10,000 police officers to be on every single interstate. But the reality is the cost of that just wouldn't be worth it. So you accept that some people are going to break the law, but hopefully we catch most of them, and hopefully things work out for the most part okay. When we talk about whether or not there's too much waste, fraud, or abuse, the question is there so much that we need to start hiring and paying even more money and more bureaucracy to go through it? And I don't feel like that's been adequately demonstrated. So is there some level of waste, fraud, and abuse? Sure, but is it too much such that we need to start like exceptional hiring measures to counter it? I am not convinced of that yet.
I think your analogy to crime is a good one. In fact, talking about speed limits, would we need to necessarily hire 10,000 more police in order to keep the speed limit at such that no one would ever break the speed limit? What about thinking outside the box? Don't worry about police. Maybe you could have some sort of governor on all cars, and the car simply wasn't able to go above 100 miles per hour. The equivalent thereof could perhaps be done in an automated way in the US government, such that there's some sort of AI technology automatically monitoring every single expenditure that's ever going on, and checking to see whether or not it counts as waste, fraud, and abuse by some metric.
Yeah, but I think that's what like auditors are for, because obviously we can make it so that the level is zero in any industry, but it's just how much money you're willing to spend to do it, and you might spend more money than you end up saving, which I think is the issue.